Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm Snow, and today, let's continue my build series with Luvata, or Luvita, whichever you prefer. For the purpose of this video, I will be going with Luvata, as that's the name they used for all of the promo footage when she was originally released 6 months ago on the other servers. So that's what I'm going with. Luvata has one of the best character designs in the entire game, but I do have a soft spot for mages. And she's definitely a powerful AOE magic damage dealing character. So in this video, let's go over her skill build as well as her skill and equipment setups. So her trait skill is called Nirvana Firebird, and this is one of the more straightforward trait skills we've had in a while. And the first section is impacted by star level quite a bit, but we're gonna go through it. So for the first part of her trait skill, she's getting an increase to her magic attack by 20%. This is the max amount at 5 stars. At base star level, it's 5%. At 2 stars, it's 10%. At 4 stars, it goes up to 15%. And then it reaches the maximum of 20% at 5 stars. She actually gets a lot of damage increases through her trait skill. So when dealing critical damage, so in other words, she lands a critical hit, it inflicts 1 stack of ignition on the target. Ignition's a life loss debuff that at the end of the turn, the target will lose HP equal to 25% of the sum of the caster's physical attack plus their magic attack, and the debuff will last for 2 turns. That effect can be triggered up to 4 times per round, but that's at max star level. At base star level, it only triggers 1 time, at 2 stars it's 2 times, at 4 stars it's 3 times, and then it reaches the maximum of 4 at 5 stars. The next part of her trait skill actually helps with triggering that effect. So for the last part of her trait skill, she starts getting this at 2 stars. So after casting fire skills, she gains 2 buffs, critical hit 3 and critical damage 3, and these buffs last for 2 turns. These buffs give her a 45% increase to both crit and crit damage. So this is a massive boost to her ability to not only crit, but in the amount of crit damage that she's going to deal. Again, this part is heavily impacted by her star level. You only start getting a crit boost at 2 stars, and it's only a 15% crit boost. At 3 stars, it's a 30% crit boost. At 4 stars, you finally get a crit damage boost. So your crit will be a 30% boost, crit damage is a 15% boost. And at 5 stars, you get the 45% boost to both crit and crit damage. So getting this massive boost, she really does need to be 5 stars to get it. So it's one of those instances where you're going to see her getting increased damage as you star level her up. I mean, it's a pretty dramatic increase from just 4 stars to 5 stars, so keep that in mind. And as for the second part of her trait skill, she has this at base star level. So at the start of battle, she grants all allies in battle Burning Tile immunity. So your characters gain a buff that will make them immune to Scorch and Burning Tiles, which is really helpful since Luvata's skills do burn the ground, so this prevents your team from taking damage from the burning tiles. She also starts with a skill called Burning Eyes, also called Searing Gaze. This is a magic damage dealing skill where you select a target tile, and it will deal 80% fire AOE damage to all enemies within 1 tile, inflicting 1 stack of ignition. It also forces the tile to become a burning tile. Luvata will also gain Attack 1, which increases her physical and magic attack by 10%, and Meditation, which is a buff that restores 1 energy at the start of the turn, and all of the effects will last for 2 turns. This is actually a really great skill to start off with because it activates a lot of her other skills and actually combos really well with some of her other skills that are in her skill tree that we'll be going over in a bit. It's also a low-cost skill, and because of the meditation buff, you basically can constantly cast this. The skill only costs 1 energy, and meditation restores 1 energy. So this is actually a really great skill for her to start off with. In terms of her skill tree, at level 1 she has a passive and a deduction skill. Let's start with the passive first. It's called Blazing. With this skill, at the end of the turn, it inflicts Scorch on 1 random injured enemy within 3 tiles of the character. and that lasts for 2 turns. Truthfully, she has other passives in her skill tree that are just much better than this. You're just not going to waste a slot on this skill. Her other option at rank 1 is called Vicious Curse, also called Ribbit. This is a debuff skill. It's also an instant skill, and this skill transforms the target into a cursed frog until the start of the target's next 2 turns. This is basically a controlled debuff, so the target will have their movement fixed to 1 tile. They also can't be buffed, debuffed, knocked back, or teleported either, and they don't take any damage. You also can't use this Cursed Frog effect on characters that are immune to Bound. This is a nice control skill to have access to that does have some niche uses, so it's recommended to pick up this skill at rank 1. At rank 3, we have 2 passive skills. First, we have Burning Heart, also called Fiery Determination. With this passive, when she's on a burning tile, her attack is increased by 20%, and at the end of the turn, it forces the character's tile to become a burning tile for 2 turns. This is actually a very useful passive, not just because it gives you an attack increase. The second part of this passive works really well with one of her reaction skills. So basically, with that reaction skill, if she's on a burning tile and she's hit by the enemy, she'll gain a shield. This guarantees she'll be standing on a burning tile at the end of her turn every single turn. There are limitations to that reaction skill, but we'll go over that in a bit. Her other option at rank 3 is called Blazing Leap, also called Leaping Flames. This is another passive skill, and when she attacks an enemy with Scorch, her crit increases by 20%. And when attacking an enemy with Ignition, her critical damage is increased by 20%. Also, upon defeating an enemy with Scorch, it will deal 60% fire AOE damage to all enemies within 2 tiles of the target, and it inflicts Ignition for 2 turns. This is her primary passive skill. It's actually used in most of her skill setup recommendations, mostly because the crit rate increase will help you activate her trait skill. But obviously, you're also getting a lot of other benefits. It's increasing her crit damage, which will help her deal even more damage. Remember, at 5 stars, she has a 45% crit and crit damage boost from that portion of her trait skill. So this adds an additional 20% on top of that. And then in addition to that, there's this last portion of the passive that lets her deal AOE damage. So there's a lot of benefits to this passive. It's really a fantastic passive, and it works really well with her trait skill. So at rank 3, it is recommended to pick up Blazing Leap, but if you do have Castalias, it's not a bad option to also pick up Burning Heart, because it's also a really good passive, and it does synergize really well with one of her reaction skills. And one of her potential builds actually uses both of these passives at the same time. But if you're short on Castalias, make sure you pick up Blazing Leap. At rank 5 are the reaction skills. The first option is called Fire Walking. This allows her to become immune to Scorch and burning tiles. Also, when she's on a burning tile, the damage is decreased by 10%, and at the start of the turn, she'll recover 20% of her HP. This is a really good reaction skill for giving her damage mitigation and self-sustain. Her other option at rank 5 is called Wall of Fire, also called Wall of Ember. And with this reaction skill, before receiving a single target physical or a single target magic attack, if the character is on a burning tile, she'll perform Preempt, absorbing the burning tile and gaining a shield. The shield is based on the corresponding damage, so if she's hit by a physical attack, she'll gain a physical shield, and if she's hit by a magic attack, she'll gain a magical shield. And the strength of the shield is 100% of her magic attack, and she'll have it for 2 turns. This is a great reaction skill for damage mitigation. Obviously, there's going to be burning tiles. Her kit is filled with burning tiles, so that criteria is not that hard to achieve. Remember that passive we just talked about that puts a burning tile underneath her at the end of the turn? I think you could see how amazingly well that passive synergizes with this reaction skill, especially since that skill gives you an attack increase, which increases the strength of the shield and the amount of damage it will absorb. And the great thing about this reaction skill is she puts the shield on preemptively before she takes the damage. So this is a very valuable reaction skill for damage mitigation. Now, there are some limitations to this reaction skill, because it has a 3-turn cooldown, so you can't use it repeatedly. But the shield does last for 2 turns, so you really only have 1 turn of downtime. Pairing this reaction skill with Burning Heart works exceptionally well. At rank 5, both reaction skills are really good, but if you could only pick one, it is recommended to pick up Wall of Ember because of the damage mitigation that she gets from this, and it improves her survivability. At rank 7, we have a support skill and a passive. The first skill is Energy Regeneration. This is a passive where at the end of the turn, she'll recover 1 additional energy, and if her energy is less than 1, she'll recover 2 energy. It is recommended to take this skill if you don't have any other way to restore your energy, like using her alongside someone like Tear that could restore your energy, or something like that. The problem with Luvata is her primary damage dealing skills are high cost, so in order for her to be able to cast them, she needs ways to get energy back quickly. This is one of the ways you can do that, where she can generate energy for herself to be able to use those skills. And we'll get to those skills soon, we haven't gone over those yet. So if you don't have any way to get energy, it is recommended to get this skill, because you'll want to carry this in one of your slots so that she's able to use those damage dealing skills. Her other option at rank 7 is called Wings of Freedom. It's also called Phoenix Transformation. And this skill is a support skill, but it's also an instant skill. This allows her to teleport to any burning tile and deals 50% fire magical damage to all enemies within a 1-tile radius of her. In addition, the tiles within range are turned into burning tiles. This skill is really good for mobility, but there has to be burning tiles on the ground to use it. You also have to be careful with how you use this. If you teleport into a group of enemies, you'll need to be able to perform another attack afterward to take out those enemies, otherwise you just left her vulnerable in the middle of a bunch of enemies for her to just basically be taken out easily. So this is one of those skills that you really have to think about how you're using it and comboing it into another skill. So for rank 7, if you don't have a way for her to recover energy, make sure you pick up Energy Restoration. However, if you do have a way for her to recover energy outside of her skill kit, in that case, you can pick up Wings of Freedom instead. At rank 9 are her basic attacks. The first option is called Scorching Attack, and this deals 80% magical damage and inflicts Scorch on the target for 2 turns. Her other option at rank 9 is called Fiery Wings. This is a single target attack that deals 90% fire magical damage to the target, and it also changes the tile to burning. This skill synergizes perfectly with her trait skill. Basically, when she uses this skill, since it's a fire attack, she'll get those crit and crit damage buffs, which she gets from one part of her trait skill. Remember, she does have to be 2 stars or more to get access to the crit rate and crit damage buffs. Fiery Wings synergizes really well with her trait skill, so at rank 9, it's recommended to pick up this skill. At rank 11, you have 2 damage skills, and both of these are important. So let's start with Fiery Wings Blazing Nirvana. This is a magical attack where you select a random enemy within 2 tiles of the target tile, and it attacks 6 times. Each attack deals 20% AOE damage to all enemies within 1 tile of the target, and the first 3 attacks inflict Scorch for 2 turns, after dealing damage. If there is a burning tile within 2 tiles of the initial selected target tile, the attack will absorb it, and additionally inflict 1 stack of ignition for 2 turns. This skill does deal a lot of damage, but it does randomly attack the enemies, and it does have a high cost of 5. This is what I mean about her skills being quite expensive. Her other option at rank 11 is called Falling Star Flame, also called Meteor Flame. This is a magical attack where you select the target tile, and if there's no burning tile within 3 tiles of the target, this skill will deal 70% fire AOE damage to all enemies within range. And it turns the center tile and the tiles in a 1-tile radius into burning. If there's a burning tile, then it increases the damage of this skill to all enemies within range to 140% damage, and it absorbs the burning tile. This is a high damage dealing skill, and it's an AOE skill, so all enemies within range of this skill will take damage. It's not random like the other skill. The only difference is you need a burning tile if you want to get the maximum damage out of this skill. And there's lots of ways to get a burning tile. You can use her basic attack, her teleport attack will also transform the tiles into burning tiles. She has the passive that makes the tile underneath her become a burning tile. So there's lots of ways that you could try to put a burning tile on the ground. That way you can get the extra damage. This skill also has a slightly lower cost at 4. At rank 11, it is recommended to pick up both skills. This will allow you to select which technique is better for a certain battlefield. Getting both gives you flexibility. I would say in terms of being able to control the amount of damage that you're doing, Meteor Flame is probably better, because it's not random like the other skill, but you do have to make sure you have a burning tile on the ground. Fiery Wings Nirvana is random, but it's easier to use, because you don't have to worry about the burning tiles, at least where the damage is concerned. So as for her skill setup, for her basic attack, you're going to have Fiery Wings. For her reaction skill, you're going to have Wall of Ember. And for her skill setup, there's a lot of ways that you can do this. Honestly, most skill builds use Blazing Leap, which is that passive that gives you that crit damage boost, which helps trigger that effect in her trait skill that lets her apply ignition stacks to the target. It also allows her to boost her damage significantly. For her second slot, you can either use Fiery Wings Nirvana or Meteor Flame. As for the last slot, if you don't have enough energy recovery on your team or through other means, you'll want to use the skill Energy Restoration. This will allow her to self-recover her energy. If you have enough energy recovery, you can use other skills in that slot instead. So you can put in the passive Burning Heart, that will give you an increase to attack, and it also creates a burning tile underneath her, which can help proc her reaction skill, so she can get that shield for protection. You can also use something like Searing Gaze. It's a low-cost skill at 1. It's also a fire attack, so it's going to trigger her trait skill. She'll also get an attack buff, as well as a meditation buff, which restores one of her energy at the start of the turn. This skill is also a great way to force burning tiles for either Meteor Flame or that teleportation skill. Using the teleportation skill is another option as well. So there is variety in how you can set up her skills, depending on how you want to use her and what team you're using her in. In terms of her equipment setup, for her weapon, I think she has a preferred weapon, but I'm not sure. If she does, you know how that goes. They're usually great for the character, because they're made for the character. But we're just gonna go straight into what's available free to play. So her best option is going to be Diffusing Prism. This is gonna give her a magic attack increase, and it increases her damage for AOE attacks for each target hit. So this gives her a great damage increase. The magic attack will also strengthen the shield she gets from her reaction skill. You can also use something like Resentment Broom. This gives increases to AOE damage, but you're really just better off using Diffusing Prism. For her trinket, a good option is Origin Hourglass. This gives her a magic attack increase, which will increase her damage and help out with strengthening her shield. She'll also get some immunities against decreased movement and speed. Another option is Roaring Flint. This lets you use an instant skill, and it's a fire attack, and that's what's really important with this. Basically, you can use this to activate her trait skill to get the crit and crit damage buffs before using any of your other damage-dealing skills that cost energy. Of course, this has a limited number of uses, so you can use it up to 2 times per battle, and there is a cooldown. Using this can definitely have value in certain situations. For consistency, you may just want to use Origin Hourglass. For engravings, you can use something like Sword and Cup. This will increase her damage while granting her 15% lifesteal. You can also use Sword and Pentacle. This will give you an attack and defense increase by 12% when unharmed. These are 2 really great options for increasing her damage output and sustainability. And as for her Tarot Whisper, a great option for her is Magician. Because she has AOE attacks, she can get a lot of damage increase out of this. Because you get the innate damage increase, and then for every additional enemy hit, you get even more of a damage increase. So this Tarot Whisper works really well for her. You can also use something like Devil. It's definitely another viable option for her for increasing her damage output. Luvata is a powerful magical AOE DPS character that excels at fire damage, burning, and scorch. She has lots of AOE magic damage dealing skills, including one that lets her teleport to burning tiles before inflicting damage. Her trace skill emphasizes boosting her damage across the board, so she gets a 20% magic attack boost, the ability to inflict ignition stacks, as well as a 45% critical rate and critical damage boost when she uses a fire attack, which is very easy to maintain with the number of fire attacks she has in her kit. However, I do want to note, star level plays a massive role in her power, especially with respect to the critical rate and critical damage buffs. These crit buffs get added at 2 stars and up, so it incrementally increases the amount of crit and crit damage boost she gets as you star level her up. And there is a massive jump from 4 stars to 5 stars. She's definitely a long-term investment type of character, so keep that in mind. However, Luvata is a very powerful AOE magical DPS character with an amazing character design, so she's definitely worth building if you get her. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.